So after a 3-year hiatus from big travel, my husband and I got to go to Scotland last month, and it was exciting. And one of the things that we wanted to do was track down where some of our family came from. Most of it was my husband's family. We met some of his third cousins who were alive, and we visited many of his ancestors who are not alive. But I was eager to find one of my ancestors. Come on, I got some Scottish. And so I did track down the place of one of them. And this is a story that comes from that place. You know, there are castles everywhere. I know that several years ago we went to Ireland, 2 different bed and breakfasts we stayed at. They had castles, 12th century castle ruins, in their backyard or in their pig, what do they call those? Pasture, something. And I thought, you know, if they did that in San Diego, they built a chain link fence around it and charge you admission and probably put up some kind of a big exciting ride. But it was a 12th century castle, as one has, of course. So this castle is called Knockdolian Castle, and it is in Ayrshire. And it is a ruin, but the walls are still standing. They build those things very, very securely. Many, many, many years ago, there was a young man who was the heir to Knockdolian Castle. To the castle and the estate, his parents were the lord and the lady, and he grew up in the most glorious way. His parents were, as I said, the lord and lady, and they loved him, and he always had the finest clothes and the finest foods and the finest music, the finest of every single thing. And every night, he was lulled to sleep by the songs of a mermaid. Beautiful, huh? Wouldn't you like a mermaid to lull you to sleep? You could play a little bit more, Rachel, so that we're a bit. Don't be lulled. Wonderful. So it was the sweetest thing in his life. He just loved that so very, very much. But years passed, and this young man grew up. He grew to be older. He grew to be of an age to be married. And his parents said, "You need to be married and provide us with an heir." Well, he had already met most of the young women around. He had established no particular attachment to any of them. But his parents kept urging him, as parents do, right? Your parents are always urging you to do the things they want you to do. And so finally, he agreed to an arranged marriage with a young woman who lived some distance away. He'd not met her before, but she came with an impeccable credential. She was well educated, and everyone said she was quite beautiful. And so they were married, and the wedding was festive and lovely. And the young man and his lady, they settled down to a life together. And it was really just in time, too, because it was not long after that the old laird and his lady passed away. And so now the young laird, he was in charge of everything. And if you've ever been in charge of a whole household, you know what that entails. You've got to deal with the servants. You've got to deal with the castle. You've got to deal with the animals. You've got to deal with the crops. You've got to deal with the tax collectors. And so he was very, very busy with all of the things that he had to do as the laird of that particular castle and estate. And his wife, the lady, she was busy as well, running the castle, as one does. But she was of a very, very particular sort. She liked to have everything exactly the way she wanted it, and because she was the lady of the castle, she usually got her way. Well, were they happily married? I suppose happily enough, because it wasn't long before a child was born, a little boy, and everyone rejoiced that there would be an heir to Knockdolian Castle. And everything was fine for the first month or so. And then something happened. That child, that baby, he became inconsolable. He simply cried all the time, all day, and what was worse, all And the lady was frantic, and the nurse was frantic, and they tried whatever they could do to calm him, but nothing seemed to work. Well, one night, the lady was in the nursery. She was patting the baby and trying to calm him down, trying to soothe him so he could get some sleep, and so could she, but nothing worked. And then she heard, drifting through the window, the sound of the mermaid singing. It was truly glorious, but to that lady trying to calm her screaming child, well, you know what it's like when you're sleep deprived. It didn't sound so lovely to her. In fact, it really annoyed her. It sounded terrible. And then it occurred to her, if it annoyed her, maybe it was annoying her child. So the next morning at breakfast, she said to her husband, "We got to get rid of the mermaid." He said, What do you mean we got to get rid of the mermaid? Her singing has been the music of my life since I was a boy. She said, "We've got to get rid of the mermaid." He said, "No, I will do nothing to get rid of that mermaid." She argued, he insisted. What could she do? But a few days later, the laird happened to say that he was going to be gone for a day and a night. He had to go into the city, some important business. And the next morning, the lady thought, this is my chance. And so she called her workmen to her and she said, "Take your hammers, take your picks, take whatever tools you need and go down to that river and destroy that rock." You see, every night when the mermaid emerged from where she dwelt in the river, every night she would swim up to the surface and she would sit on a large, flat, black rock. That's where she made her music. And the lady knew that. And that's why she said to her servants, "Destroy that rock." And they objected. They said, "Surely this would not be a good idea." Think this is a good idea? Oh no, we know better than that, don't we? But she insisted, and because she was the lady and they were her servants, they complied. They took hammers and they took picks and they took all kinds of tools. And you know, that sound was like music to the lady because it was the sound of destruction. Oh, well, by the time the sun went down, that large, flat, black rock, it was nothing but shards in the bottom of the riverbed. The lady was pleased. But that night, the mermaid emerged from her watery dwelling and she swam up to the surface and she prepared to sit down on that rock and sing. But there was no rock. And then she dove under the water and she saw just the bits and pieces, the shards of that black rock on the bottom of the riverbed. Who could have done such a thing? She looked up, and there in the castle window, she saw that lady looking down at her with an air of triumph and satisfaction. And so that mermaid, she looked up at the lady, and she opened her mouth, but it was not a song. She said, "You think of your cradle. I will think of my stone, and there'll never be an heir to Knockdolian again." I know. The lady closed the curtains and went back into the castle, and the mermaid dove back into the river. But the next day, there was a storm. There was thunder. There was lightning. There was rain that turned into hail, and there was wind, such a mighty wind that the very stone walls of that castle seemed to shake. And all of the people inside cried out in fear and terror. The castle was abuzz with people screaming and crying in fear and terror. Except it was quiet in the nursery. So they ran into the nursery, and there they saw the cradle overturned, the babe on the floor face down, tangled in the bedclothes, lifeless. The next day, the laird returned and heard the sad news. Well, he blamed his wife. She blamed the mermaid. But no matter how much blame was thrown around, it could not undo what had happened. And it was not long after that that both the laird and his lady died, leaving Knockdolian Castle without an heir, just as the mermaid had said. Well, the castle was inherited by some distant relatives, the McCubbins, who just happened to be ancestors of mine. And their term, according to the story, and their term in the castle turned out to be much, much happier. Why was that? Because they heard the story. They were warned, and they learned what the mermaid had said. They used to say to their heirs, "If we think of our castle, we've this truth to tell. Pay heed to the mermaid, and all will go well." The legend of Knockdolian Castle, or the mermaid's curse. Thanks, Rachel.